If you're watching this because you purchased one of my kits, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much. And if you just stumbled upon this video, hello, welcome. My name is Elizabeth and I teach people how to embroider. All right, let's get started. I'm super excited. So let's go ahead and grab our hoop and fabric and our stick and stitch design. And then we are going to peel our design just like we would a sticker. And then we are going to center it as best we can in the hoop and stick it to the fabric. Now we'll just apply a little pressure, just make sure it's stuck on the fabric. You can also flip your design face down on like a hard surface and just apply some pressure to the back of the fabric, and that just helps the sticker stick even more. We are going to start with our white thread. A really easy way to know how long your thread should be is to measure it from your hand to your shoulder. Mine is roughly like 22 inches. If your thread is too long, it's going to be really hard to work with and it's just going to knot up super easy. We're going to be using 3 strands of thread for this entire project. The thread that we just cut has 6 strands of thread, so we need to separate it. To do that, just grab 3 strands of thread in each hand, and then I very slowly pull it apart. If you do this too fast, your thread will knot up, so just take it nice and slow. Now we're going to get our threader and needle, and we're going to insert the metal part of the threader through the eye of the needle like this. And then I'm going to hold on to the needle with my left hand, making sure the threader is still staying through the eye of it. And then with my right hand, I'm going to grab our thread and put it through the metal part of the needle threader, so it will look something like this. And then I'm just going to pull my needle out of the needle threader. To make sure our stitches are secure in the hoop, we are going to tie just a single knot at the end of our thread. The last thing I want to go over with you is how to tie your thread off in the back. There are so many different methods for this, but this is what I do. I'm going to insert my needle under a previous stitch in the back of my fabric. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle through those stitches, but I'm not going to pull the thread all the way through. I'm going to pull it to about like this point. And then I'm going to insert my needle into this loop, and then I will pull it all the way through, creating a knot. And then I'll trim any extra thread off in the back. Okay, let's get started. Grab your needle that we just threaded with the white thread. We're going to start with the top left flower, so you are going to insert your needle at the very top center flower petal. And then you're going to pull your needle through the back of the fabric until you reach the end of your thread. We want to make one single straight stitch through the center of the flower petal. To help me know where I insert my needle, I typically will straighten the thread out like this and put it down the center, and then I'll insert my needle back into the fabric at the very end of the flower petal in the center. And then you're going to pull your needle all the way through the back of the fabric. We're pretty much just doing a satin stitch here. For our next stitch, we're going to start at the top of the flower petal again. Insert your needle directly next to the first stitch we made at the top, getting it as close as you can, but not in the same hole. And then just pull your needle through the back of the fabric. Now insert your needle to the left of the first stitch we made at the very bottom. We don't want to insert our needle back into the same hole, but get it as close as you can next to it. Now we're going to repeat that same step, except we're going to do it on the right side of the flower petal. For satin stitches, I personally always like starting in the center and then working my way out. It's much easier for me personally to maintain even and straight stitches that way. And then I'm just going to repeat those steps 2 more times. So 1 more stitch on the left side and 1 more stitch on the right side. So by the time you're done, you'll have made 5 stitches total. For the sides of my flower petals, I always like adding a little angle. I think it just gives it a little bit more dimension. And to do that, I'll start on the left or right side and I'll pull my needle through the back of the fabric like we've been doing at the top. And at this point, I will insert my needle into the same exact hole from my previous stitch at the very bottom. And this just gives it a little bit of an angle. I think it looks really good. I think it gives it kind of like a curve and makes it look like our flower petals are folding in a little bit. And that is how I stitch my flower petals. So you'll have 7 stitches to each flower petal. Feel free to add more if you want to make it look fuller, or maybe in some areas you want to do less stitches, and that's totally fine. It's up to you. There is no right or wrong. So then you'll just want to fill in the rest of your flower petals that same way on the current flower and the one to the right of it. We will fill in the center of the flower petals with the satin stitch using our orange thread. And we're going to stitch this one from right to left. Starting the center, I'll pull my needle through the back of the fabric, and then I'm going to straighten my thread out again using my guideline method that I showed you all earlier, making one single straight stitch, inserting my needle back into the fabric, and then pulling it all the way through. And I just continue using the satin stitch, which is just all straight stitches until the desired area is filled in. I ended up using 7 stitches, but it's okay if you use more, and it's okay if you use less. We just want to make sure the center of the flower is filled in. Now that we're done filling in the center of the flower petals and our needle is already threaded with the orange thread, we're going to start on our little flowers. For each of these flower petals, I'm going to use 3 stitches total. 1 stitch down the very center of the flower petal, and then 1 angled stitch on each side. I'm going to pull my needle through the back of the fabric directly next to the first stitch that we made. Then I'm going to insert my needle back into the same hole that we created from our first stitch. Then I'm just going to repeat that same exact step for the right side of our flower petal. Now I'm going to repeat those same exact steps for the remainder of the flower petals. And for the bottom stitches of each of my flower petals, I'm going to insert them all into the exact same hole that we made from our very first flower petal. Now that all of our little flowers are filled in, we're going to grab our blue thread and start on the right flower. And I'm filling in these flower petals the same exact way I filled in our white flower petals. So just repeat those same exact steps on these petals until they are all filled in. With our white thread, I'm going to fill in the center of our blue flower with a satin stitch just like we did with our white flowers. And it doesn't really matter how many stitches we use to fill in areas. The goal is just to fill in the area. So sometimes for some center of the flower petals, I might use 7 stitches, other times I might use 6, but the main goal is just to fill in the area with that stitch. So don't get caught up in the amount of stitches you're using for each area. I just have people ask me how many I use a lot of times, so I just try to give like a general idea, but it really doesn't matter. Now we are going to start on our left flower with our purple thread. And we are going to fill in all 3 of these flower petals exactly like we have been with our other flower petals. Now we're going to grab our green thread and fill in the base of our purple flower using the satin stitch. With the green thread, I'm going to fill in the stem of our purple flower first using the whipped back stitch. Now we're going to use the whip back stitch again on our vine. We will stitch this vine in 2 separate parts, and we're going to stop and fill in the first part with the whip back stitch once our stitches meet the purple vine. So don't worry about the bottom part of the vines right here, we'll fill those in later. Now we're just going to continue filling in the remainder of our flower stems using the whip back stitch. Once again, do not worry about filling in the very bottom part of the vines, we'll do that later on. Now we're going to fill in the very bottom of the flower stems. Starting with the stem to the very left, I'm going to use the whip back stitch. I'm going to repeat that same step on the 3rd and 4th stem, so I'm going to fill those in using the whip back stitch as well. Now that those are filled in, for the 2nd stem, I am just going to fill it in using 1 single stitch. It's so tiny right there, so there's no need to do a full whipped back stitch. For the leaves, pull your needle through the back of the fabric at the very top center of the leaf and make 1 single straight stitch. For the sides of the leaves, pull your needle through the back of the fabric, getting it as close as you can to the first stitch that we just made. Now we're going to insert our needle into the same hole at the bottom of the leaf. And this goes for the same leaves that are on the flower stems as well. Now with our purple thread, we are going to add a single French knot to every little dot on our pattern. I know the video tutorial that I posted is for a double French knot, but the only thing differently you're going to do here is wrap your thread around the needle once instead of twice. So if you wrap the thread around your needle once, that's a single French knot, and if you wrap your thread around the needle twice, that's a double French knot. For this last part, we are going to use all 6 strands of our blue thread. Right where all of our stems overlap here, we're going to insert our needle into the front part of the fabric. Don't pull the thread all the way through, leave about, 4 or 5 inches kind of overhanging here. Now at the opposite side, we're going to pull our needle through the back of the fabric. Now I'm just going to trim the right side of my thread to be at about 4 or 5 inches, doesn't need to be exact. Now I'm just going to tie that blue embroidery thread into a double knot. Now I'm going to trim that blue thread again to be at about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long. It doesn't really matter, just really whatever looks good to you. And now we're all done stitching our hoop, so we just need to rinse our stick and stitch off. Please do not rinse your stick and stitch off using hot water. If you rinse the sticker off using hot water, it's possible that the dye in your embroidery floss will release and it'll stain your fabric. So I just rinse mine off using lukewarm water. I'll rinse the back of my fabric as well because that helps the sticker dissolve. So just keep rinsing it under lukewarm water until the sticker completely dissolves. Once your fabric is dry, you'll be ready to go ahead and back your hoop. It's possible that your fabric isn't as tight in the hoop as it once was, so I'm just going to show you how to fix that real quick. I'm just going to unscrew the top of the hoop just a little bit. We just want to create enough space to be able to pull our fabric through. Now I'm just going to work my way around the hoop, slightly tugging at the outside of the fabric. What I do is I kind of alternate between pulling the fabric through and then tightening the top of the screw and then pulling the fabric again. We just don't want there to be any indentions of the fabric. Once you're done pulling the fabric out around the hoop, then you can go ahead and tighten it as best as you can at the top part on the hoop. Now it's time to back our hoop. Start by grabbing whatever color of embroidery floss you would like to use. And I would measure the thread from your hand to your shoulder again like we've been doing. Go ahead and flip your embroidery hoop face down. Insert your needle into the fabric at the top of your hoop. Pull your needle all the way through the fabric, but leave about 3 to 4 inches of embroidery thread. Now leave about 1/2 inch of space and insert your needle into the fabric from the front side of the fabric. Then you're just going to pull your needle all the way through. All you're doing is just weaving your needle and thread in and out of the fabric. So we will just repeat those same exact steps all the way around the hoop until we reach the very first stitch that we made. Now that we reach the top, we want to make sure that the last stitch is made from the front of the fabric to the back. So you want to make that last stitch facing you. Unthread your needle from the embroidery thread since we no longer need it. Okay, now this is my favorite part because it's so satisfying. Grab 1 strand of embroidery thread in each hand and pull it tight to cinch the fabric. Wasn't that so fun? Now you're just going to make a knot with the thread, keeping the fabric as tight as you can. Then I'll tie my thread 2 more times just to make it extra secure. Then once I'm done tying my knots, I'll go ahead and trim the embroidery floss if I feel like it needs to be shorter. And just like that, she's all done. I would love to see your finished piece, so if you would like to share it, please feel free to tag me on Instagram or TikTok. Thank you so much for stitching this with me. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and if you have any questions or comments for me, please feel free to reach out.